What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Paradox Kingdom. My name is Steven Hernandez. So, we talk about Christianity, we talk about anything and everything that has to do with that. We also fact check Christians and non Christians or atheists as well, Muslims, whoever. Um, my desire is, to know whatever is true and follow it. But sometimes Christians are making up stuff as well. We'll get into that as well as we talk about end time prophecies and um, people who hijack Christianity as well, because that's something definitely going on a lot. But this is going to be part two of conversations with non-Christians, non-believers, because I think it's important for us to have those relationships, but also to talk to people with love and respect. And so this is not his first time on, is the second time on, and we had a great conversation, and I continue to learn from him. But then also I think just just having those relationships where we're like, hey, we don't agree on everything, but we can learn and grow together, which is something that I champion. So I'm gonna bring um, Mike Apple, Mr. Michael Apple. You don't have any stock in Macintosh, do you?
I was long Apple stock for about 22 years. And there's a
Nice.
stockbroker actually made the stock, but there's
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, you did mention that.
other than a stock opportunity and sharing the last name, no relation. But
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. But yeah. So you're probably like a billionaire now, millionaire, all the stocks.
I'm not a billionaire.
Yeah. Nice. What's it say on your cup? The little
I'll
man.
try to get it closer. Can you see it?
Nice. I told you so. Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, so Mike, again, I enjoy having conversations and sometimes going back and forth with Mike on Facebook. That's kind of where I met from. For those who know Brady's podcast, Icapod, and his basically his Facebook channel. And so this is not the first time we had him, but he's been talking a lot about end time prophecies and things like that, especially since we know there's a lot of Iran's being nuked and everybody's getting nuked and all this stuff going on. But um, so let's see. So since we've talked last time, what else has been going on that's kind of you've been focusing on? And you can talk about that as we get into the topics you want to talk about, end time prophecies or Christian nationalism. I know that's something I want to talk about. All that good stuff.
Sure. I think since the last time we spoke, I think the various rapture related controversies
Raptures. Okay.
were ongoing in TikTok. I think it was after the first phase of it last year, and going into the second phase after people were being reconciled to the fact that maybe they weren't going to rapture immediately after the Rosh Hashanah holiday. And then they said,
Mm,
well, no, okay, it'll be a month later. And of course, that didn't happen as well. So that kind of put that topic to the fore. Obviously, almost the vast majority of Christians I've spoken to, we're not convinced by TikTok prophets, but it does kind of bring up the issue of what are the expectations, because obviously rapture is not understood the same way across all the various groups of Christianity. So the first question I would ask people honestly is, are you expecting something like rapture or are you not? Because that's kind of a
mm,
line of division inside the Christian belief to start with. And then, of course, the election of Donald Trump to a second term has brought Christian nationalism back in a very big way. And there
yeah.
is, I mean, I'll never accuse Donald Trump of actually caring about the Bible or Christian values, but he was certainly capable of making use of certain belief systems, especially among conservatives who take this stuff seriously. And if you
Yeah.
talk to these people online, you definitely notice that.
Yeah.
You definitely will see them bringing up prophecy, or this is the events that we're seeing in the world right now are in accordance with prophecy. And because I've always had a deep interest in biblical prophecy, I get involved.
So interesting. So from your perspective as well as a Jew, and then also looking into it, what would you have? expected, like the end time prophecies to be? What would it look like from your perspective? Like
Well,
I mean, for them, they're still kind of waiting for a Messiah, right? And
exactly.
yeah, so I was curious on that.
Judaism has a very long experience with messianic expectations in the end of the world. You could make the argument that Christianity is one of the expressions of one of the periods of this, and it's changed over time. It's not always been the same. There have been a lot of changes. It's very nice to imagine that you had a coherent message about what you were expecting from the very beginning, but I don't think that is
Yeah.
defensible. But in basic idea is it starts most, I would say it starts with Isaiah. It starts with the collapse of the northern kingdom, which is described in the first part of Isaiah as it's conquered by the Assyrians. This as the northern kingdom falls, we know that this institutes a large refugee crisis, a lot of whom end up in the southern kingdom. And then we know that this creates a deep tension inside the survivors who are mostly in the southern kingdom. And then you can either make the argument that second Isaiah is the first Isaiah is having a prophetic dream of when the same thing or something similar happens to the southern kingdom under the auspices of the Babylonians, which will occur about 120 years later. So what happens is the northern kingdom falls. You have about a century of interregnum, and then the southern kingdom starts experiencing the same difficulties that ended up destroying the northern kingdom. If you recall your Isaiah, you'll know that the Assyrians attempted to conquer the southern kingdom too, and there was a perception that the southern kingdom was saved by a miracle. So then what you have is when the Babylonians return to do the same thing in about 120 years, we're waiting maybe for another miraculous salvation. But by then, the prophets of this later age, Jeremiah probably being the most famous, maybe Ezekiel, their message is, okay, there will be no salvation from this one. Instead of saving the kingdom from being destroyed by Babylonian armies, instead, you're going to go into exile, and then the prophecies become about how we come back from this.
The remnant?
Absolutely. How are the righteous remnant, how are the people who are taken from the city, taken from Jerusalem, eventually return, rebuild the temple, and so forth. Details, especially in the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, etc. So the messianic expectation has changed from the salvation that you would find at the beginning of Isaiah directly from the Assyrians to can the righteous remnant return from exile that's been imposed on them from the Babylonians. And then what happens when they do return? When they return from the exile after, it's about 59 years, but let's say it's roughly assumed to be about 70 years. You then have the righteous remnant come back. They come back to Judea, and then they're now a province of the Persian Empire. That's going to last for a couple of centuries. Then the Persian Empire will be replaced by the army of Alexander, and then after he dies, it'll be a competing goal for two of the successor states of that empire. Really, the point here is that if you were expecting that the old Israeli, the old Jewish state was going to come back, is going to have its own temple, it's going to be in charge of its own destiny, which you would get from reading Isaiah, it doesn't occur. This builds an additional tension over, okay, what does that mean? Persian rule, we think, was pretty light. Hellenistic rule was either oscillated between benign neglect to actual direct oppression, leading up to the worst case of the oppression under the Seleucid king Antoninus IV, who kicks off what we'll end up calling Hanukkah.
Okay. Yeah.
So we've started with all this with a conquest of Jerusalem, or twice in 597 and then 586, which ends up in the destruction of the temple. The righteous remnant end up back in the country after about, under Cyrus the Great. They're ruled by the Persians, then they're ruled by the various flavors of Greek states, and then eventually there's a great big war kicked off in the 160s, ending roughly about 164. And then there's a bunch of other additional conflicts as the Maccabean successor state, attempts to push itself completely out of the Seleucid orbit, which finally succeeds under Simon, I think in like 144. So that's a long period of time in which there is no meaningful Jewish state with anything like meaningful Jewish autonomy. And then there is. And the Hasmonean state, which will exist for about 80 years, will end up being the largest state that we can actually historically record in the ancient world that's run by the Jews, by the Judeans. And we also will see at about that time period expectations of the Messiah change, I think, yet again. Yeah. Whereas previously the expectations of the Messiah is that he'd be a conquering king who would be sent by God, who would basically fulfill the promises in Isaiah 11. Instead, you now get David. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, David or David Hezekiah, right? Yeah, if Hezekiah was like David reborn, then this Jewish Messiah will be like Hezekiah or David reborn. They'll be from the same house of David, which nobody has. There's no person from the house of David to actually rule anything in Israel for many centuries at this point. He's got to make it work again, make the prophetic promises happen, and then at the end of all that, introduce it to the world. Because if you look at Isaiah 40 through Isaiah 56, you will see that the return from Babylon is going to be presaged with the essential conquest of the entire world. All the world will know, all the world will follow the dictates of Yahweh, Hashem. And then it'll be, from their point of view, the end of history. All the things that were wrong or had become wrong over time will be corrected. And in this messianic era, the real history, the history that we've all been waiting for, will happen. God will be in charge.
And when did the idea of the two messiahs come out? Because I've heard of that, right? Because there's was that later developed or probably
don't
later?
know. To be fair, and I want to be fair to your Christian viewers, we don't really know. We can say for sure the oldest real commentary on it is from the Hasmonean period, and that would be probably in the 80s, so maybe about 2 generations before Jesus. And this would be the Qumran sect's teacher of righteousness, who we don't really know who he was. He has a title. There's a lot of guesswork on who this person was. It is generally speculated that he was killed by the Hasmonean state in the generally the 70s, pretty much at the height of Hasmonean power, before the Hasmonean kings ran into the universal solvent of all ancient societies at about this time around the Mediterranean, Rome. The Hasmonean state is taken out of power in 63 when Pompey Magnus conquers basically what the Romans would consider the East. So that would be, well, we would consider the areas from southern Turkey all the way down to Egypt. And so I would say the period before that is the period in which this idea from somewhere gets embedded. So the Qumran sect, what we call the Essenes, they're advocating for at least 2 messiahs. Did they originate the idea? I doubt it. I'm pretty sure it's probably earlier. It's earlier than them too. So we don't know, but it's an idea. And I think I know. I can speculate that the idea comes from the fact that the Davidic Messiah doesn't come back. You have all these chances for the Davidic Messiah to reassert, to come at the end of some sort of time of tribulations, but the Davidic Messiah never shows up. And when the Hasmonean kingdom does show up, what you get is somebody like Alexander Jannaeus, or John Hyrcanus, who, though they may seem like powerful kings, they don't really seem like messiahs. They don't make Israel. They don't make Israel a global empire. They don't even seem particularly religious. John Hyrcanus spends an awful lot of time subjugating Pharisees. It's like it's not like a pretty divine picture. Instead, he just seems like another relatively potent local warlord as opposed to the king of the world.
Yeah.
So I think it's the tension. It's the fact of you have this expectation and then it doesn't happen. So you look back to the text and you try to reinterpret it to see what you did wrong previously. And by that time, give it a couple of generations, then you get John the Baptist, you get Jesus. Before John the Baptist and Jesus, you have Judas the Galilean, who was a major impact in the Galilee in the generation before Jesus. So you get these different ideas about what the Messiah is supposed to be like, and you get a lot of examples. And then after Jesus, you have a number of additional messianic claimants coming out of Judaism that have various levels of scope, mostly ultimately ending up in the revolt against the Romans. Well, there's 3 of them, but we'll go with the big famous one that destroyed the temple. And then after that, we've got another one that happened in Cyprus and in Egypt. And then after that, we have from the Jewish point of view, I would say arguably the third and final revolt was the worst and largest because it involved the most people. And that was the revolt of Bar Kokhba in the 130s.
Yeah.
Ending up in the final expulsion of Jews from Jerusalem for generations. On pain of
What
death.
year was that? Around what year?
132 to 136. Bar Kokhba was probably dead in 135. Romans destroyed Jerusalem and then plant a new city on it called Ius Capitolina.
Yeah, because that was in the 70s, right? When the second temple was destroyed, and then years later they did another revolt.
Second temple happened. The revolt starts in 66, where against the Romans. Romans had been running basically Judea on too much of a budget before, not realizing just how much danger the Romans could actually face trying to hold it long term. And also, I'll point out that happens at a time of tremendous Roman instability too. So, you can't discount the fact that after years of misrule under Nero that eventually come to an end in 68,
a
lot of the outlying states attached to Rome might see this as an opportunity because of troops, large numbers of troops who would be in Syria aren't in Syria anymore because they've got to be closer to the Roman capital. And then in between 68 and 69, you have after Nero dies. And remember, this is still in the context in which the Judean War is occurring, starting in 66, going on the way to 70. Imagine the Roman state collapses, and then you have the year for Caesars, where the last Caesar ends up being Vespasian, who's been the one general who's been successful in fighting the Jews in the Jewish campaign. He leaves his son Titus in charge, and he destroys Jerusalem, while Vespasian becomes the final claimant Caesar, who ends up becoming not only emperor but stays emperor. He doesn't die because somebody with a competing claim comes in and destroys his army. So chaos everywhere, which brings me to back to Christianity full suit, because you look at something like the Olivet Discourse or Matthew 24. Christians are waiting for the end of the world the same way that Jews have these messianic expectations of Messiah come. They've got a Messiah, so they're waiting for the Messiah to come back and finish the job. So this is a great time. Look, chaos is happening in Rome. Chaos is happening. Wars everywhere. I mean, this has got to be it. This is the moment. The big push. The temple is destroyed. This is definitely a sign, right? Not a stone will be standing. It's going to happen. And then instead of the world coming to an end, Vespasian just creates a new dynasty of imperial rule, and everything kind of calms down. Vespasian dies in bed. His son Titus rules for a while until he dies from a fever. And then his youngest son, Domitian, comes into power, I believe, in the early 90s. And then goes kind of crazy, and then you have another period of political instability, getting rid of Domitian. So if you're a Christian or a Jewish Christian, which is something that was pretty easy to be at this time, a fair number of the early Christians would have started out as Jews at some level. They may not have been the aristocracy in Judea, but they were certainly people who knew at least a little bit about Judaism, and some of them, like Paul, were literate. So that would take the expectations from earlier messianic expectations, find Jesus, look at the prophecies again to see to what of the prophecies seem to describe to them Jesus, and then wait for Jesus to come back and finish everything that's in the tradition, including the end of days. Now, hopefully that was brief enough. But you're looking at the time difference from the destruction of the temple to the Bar Kokhba revolt. Temple is destroyed in 70. The Bar Kokhba revolt happens in early 130s. It's a substantial amount of time.
Yeah.
The revolt ends up causing the destruction of the temple. Is a revolt that's happening inside Galilee and Judea. The revolt for Bar Kokhba, though, starts in the diaspora.
Yeah, no, there was a few other thoughts that I was thinking as you were talking, somewhat off topic as well. But I was just curious. I was looking at because I never studied what the early church fathers believed about that, because as you're saying, right, they're going through all these things. There's all this turmoil, like obviously, right? This is the time, even more so now than earlier. But then because right now we're really fascinated with it, because especially now we see things are happening, especially in the Middle East. I've heard people looking and hearing about the red heifer, the third temple being built. You know what I mean? Like I've heard all that, and we're super fast infatuated with it. So I was curious. I was kind of looking up what some of them had said about it, right? Because Paul thought it was going to happen in his time. Like he thought it was like, don't get married. If you're not married, don't get married. If you're married, stay married. Like he thought it was going to happen before he died.
And 1 Corinthians 7. He's giving what's cool. What's interesting about Paul is like, okay, it's going to happen soon, but don't sell the family farm. Right. There's this interesting tension in Paul, which I think only happens because Paul's had to field this question for decades. No, not yet. No. 1 Corinthians is written around 50. He's probably been getting this question for at least 15 or 16 years. Yeah. So he's telling these people, look, it's going to happen. Really, it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon, but we can't know exactly when. Be ready. But, you still have a life to lead. But, don't get married. Don't worry about, don't worry about changing your status.
Yeah. So I think that's something I'm going to look up, just because I'm curious as what they believed and how they talked about it. Because even like when I first got saved, let's see, 2006. So 20 years in July.
Yeah.
So when I first got saved, I heard a little bit about it. And then as I kind of got more into faith and I started hearing more about it, like repent, get ready, stay prepared, the whole idea of the bridesmaids with their oil, that the parable, they weren't ready. There were some that weren't ready and there's some that were ready, and it came and he came like a thief in the night. And then, then I stopped hearing about it and people weren't talking about it as much, maybe because failed prophecies, made up prophecies, 2012, and all these different dates. So I was just curious to see what did they think about it, since it was before Roman Catholicism took over. It was in that in between phase, right? Like, because once things are going good, things are going good, right? It's like, hey, I don't know if I want Jesus to come back. There might be some of that. I don't know if there was, but I'm thinking about it, especially in America. Like, hey, when things are good, there's no wars, we're the top, we got, all that. But so recently I was at a friend with a friend. So it was his friends. There was like 4 of them. And so they just kind of get together, kind of talk about theology, different. Some are Calvinists and some are Arminians type of thing. And they just kind of get together and just talk theology. And so one of the conversations they started having was kind of replacement theology, right? Like that's not what they called it, but basically that's what it is. And so they were kind of like going against the Jews in general, like pretty bad. And I was like, and so I started to kind of bring some balance, like, hey, is that what Paul thought about them? Like, is that how Jesus looked at them? You know, there's so many things where Paul was saying, hey, I wish that I can trade places with my brothers, with my Jewish people, and go to hell if that would save them, right? Like he's talking about in general. Like you said, most of the early believers, most of the early church was Jewish. And then as Paul started to go to Gentiles, but just kind of like talking about that as well. But I was just thinking about replacement theology and different things like that. There was a thought I had earlier. I don't remember exactly how it tied in, but just thinking about the Jewish people, just thinking about the chosen people, thinking about those different connections that we have. Obviously, that's pretty much the reason why America and others have kind of protected Israel. Not only what happened in, you know, with Hitler and things like that, but then also because they believe they're still the chosen people. They're not just the chosen people for a time, and then now the church is a chosen people, which is what I believe. I believe that, you know, they're still God's chosen people, and the church is continuing to help and do things. But then we made some mistakes, right? Like Hitler, oh, not Hitler, Luther said a lot of crazy things about them, which I think Hitler took and twisted and things like that. But I'll kind of think about it later. But just kind of hearing your thoughts on replacement theology, or have you ever studied or even looked into it?
I have.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. My understanding of the thoughts on replacement theology are probably better historically than contemporary examples, but I've been sort of forced to re-examine the contemporary ones. I don't want to go into Hitler because I don't think Hitler would have even understood the term of replacement theology, because he was a pretty indifferent Christian even when he was younger. And he didn't need Luther to be an anti-Semite. He could get it just from the background cultural influences of his being raised in Austria. So whatever he's doing,
he was half Jewish, right? That's what's weird.
Oh, no, he wasn't. There was a rumor that happened after he died that he had Jewish ancestry, I think, out of a grandmother, but that's never been verified.
Oh, okay.
You have to understand, if you grew up in Vienna in the 19th century, the chance that you probably had a Jewish ancestor in there somewhere is pretty high. Because Vienna, Vienna was at the time extremely cosmopolitan. Hell, even when I was there in the 1970s, it was very cosmopolitan. It's Vienna. It's like one of the cultural capitals of Europe. So there has been a big Jewish community, or had been a big Jewish community in Vienna for a long time. So I can't say, well, no, he didn't have it at all, but he doesn't have any specific.
Okay, so there was no specific. That's what I've thought.
But I guess a Jewish doctor to being the doctor who helped his mother during her illness. So Hitler's view on the Jews is deeply conflicted. But I think it's outside of the scope of replacement theology. With replacement theology, it's pretty straightforward. The Jews drop the ball. This new group, Christians, who may include some Jews, maybe doesn't. I think demographically speaking, the number of Jews in the early portions of the Christian church is tiny. But it did survive probably up into as late as the 3rd or the 4th century. So even though it was really, really small, we suspect that there was at least one gospel that was written in Hebrew. But I'll just suggest that those followers in the 4th century are not very closely connected to whatever was going on in Judea in the 1st century. True. All we have is the writings of the New Testament. We know that Paul was a Hellenized Jew, and it's very, very likely that all the people whose names you'd recognize, or most of them you'd recognize, were Jews to some extent. Yeah. So it was an idea by Jews to other Jews that then was taken to Christians. So, and the destruction of Jerusalem sort of seals the fate, I think, of Judaism and Christianity. It means that almost all new growth in Christianity is going to be outside of Judea. It's going to be in places where they're Greek speaking and probably not Jews.
Oh, And one of their big things they were talking about the Talmud. Have you read the Talmud? Do you know much about it? Because
Anybody who says they've read all of the Talmud is probably lying to you. It's
yeah,
vast. And there's
and
several.
I'm pretty sure they just picked and choose because I'm pretty sure they didn't read probably much anything, but they probably cherry picked the bad parts, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you have the Talmud, which is commentary on everything, including the law, and then it's broken down into specific parts. The Midrash is the stuff that's predominantly associated with the law, but it was written over, the Babylonian Talmud was like written over the period of like 500 years. So
Wow.
it's a vast literary tradition. It's huge. It's comparable to the Buddhist canon in the sense that there's the commentary is much larger than the original text it's based on.
Yeah, which is, I mean, definitely true because we have books and books and books of each commentary of it's not exactly the same, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Right, but think of all the Christian literature that's been derived from through Christian theology, early church followers, all those writings, the writings of the church or the various churches, it's kind of similar.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of commentary because
yeah,
a lot to write about.
I think their main thing was just their idea of Jesus portrayed in there, which, you know, it makes sense. If you believe that Jesus is a false prophet, then yeah, absolutely. You know, so their main thing was that no, it talks about him in very bad ways and things like that. So yeah. But yeah, I was just curious about it.
He's considered a false prophet in Judaism, obviously not in Christianity. And so replacement theology comes from the basic Christian idea that Judaism failed the test, which was Jesus coming, and then now has to go off and find its own separate destiny. And therefore, the covenant that was guaranteed to Abraham has now moved on over and is now the responsibility of whichever Christian church we're talking about. And by the time you get to, the 3rd or 4th century, the Christian church involved is probably the church in Rome.
Yeah.
And then, but that you'll note how much instability is always happening in the process. The church in Rome can't tell the church in Egypt what to do very well. The church in Rome can barely even communicate with the church in Syria. And if there's churches that are further east than Syria that are outside of the Roman world, you couldn't care less what Rome has to say. And so it's like there's an effort. Whenever you look at these histories, you have to understand that there's an effort to make it about one thing or a unified message. And the unified message constantly is elusive because there's always somebody outside of the fold going, I don't know. I don't think that's true. In Judaism, the general cultural assumption is we assume there's nothing authoritative going on. Everything is debated because this is just the way Jewish history has come out since the destruction of the first temple. It took centuries to get diaspora Jewish communities to even agree that the Torah law was the same thing in any given area. Once that did happen, and that seemed to be largely the agreement, there's still an ongoing discussion going on. And then the second temple is destroyed. So the argument starts over again. You can look at rabbinical Judaism, the Judaism of the Talmud, as an attempt to get back to having a unified message again. Right? Because long periods of periods of stability followed by periods of chaos, destruction, rebirth, renewal, and so on and so forth. And this kind of goes back to the whole expectation of an end of the world.
Yeah.
How many times have we been through it? On one of Brady's posts, I just informally counted, and I got up to about 25 messianic claimants for the Jewish people from the time of the Hasmoneans to roughly about the 3rd century. And then I gave up because the number of actual claimants has to be in the hundreds for Judaism. If I get that high by the time of the 3rd century. And if you look at Christianity, it's also goes through the same pulses because I think prophetic literature kind of encourages you to do so. So you're going to ask about the modern context and how we rate. And I would say in the modern context, we're doing exactly the same thing we've been doing the entire time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, it's not revolutionary. It's just what we do, and it's a one way of dealing with an uncertain world. And the world's been uncertain for a very long time.
A very, very long time. Yeah.
So that would be my personal take. Somebody says, well, what do you think about the modern world? Are we getting close to messianic times? I don't think there's a single prophetic author who presented with the modern world would have any idea what in the hell was going on. They were writing mostly for their own times. They would not understand anything that we're going through now. They wouldn't understand what was good. They wouldn't understand what was bad. It would be outside of their experience. They were not dreaming of now. They were dreaming of their own time. But that's my take on it.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what your take on it is, because from our talk before, it's like you're definitely willing to go, okay, it's going to happen, but I don't necessarily know when or how or what the circumstances are. So I'm very curious about that, because you're not falling for TikTok rapture conspiracies.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there are some things that I would say, yeah, this is what I believe. Kind of most of it is traditional, what others have said already. So it's not going to be anything striking for the most part. I did find it's interesting, which I don't know if it's becoming more popular or if it's just something that these same people that I know that go to the same church said. So one of them, I guess they're reading a book, and in there it's talking about Revelation. It's like a commentary on Revelation, not really fully commentary like verse by verse, but for them, they were saying that everything basically in Revelation is already passed. Like it's already fulfilled. In the time of Nero, all that stuff has already gone. So in a sense, like John was writing just for those people in his time, and that's it. Yeah. In a sense, it has no implication to us. Obviously, the other part that hasn't been fulfilled is when the new heavens and the new earth, right? And all that has not been fulfilled, literally. But at least for them, and these were two people that I was like, I've never even thought about that. Just because I'm for the most part, prophecy, apocalyptic literature, there's something happening now, but then there's something that's going to be fulfilled later. Right, like it is happening now, Daniel or Isaiah, whatever. There was something happening, right? Like to us, a child is born, the virgin birth. Obviously, it wasn't exactly back then, but there was a young girl who gave birth, and all these other things. But at least for me, I believe it was fulfilled in Jesus, right? Like Mighty Counselor, Wonderful God, like all these titles onto a normal human being. I think that's that is blasphemous in a sense, unless there's something different. Going back to Revelation, all the stuff that's saying, okay, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Some of it was fulfilled, but I feel, at least for me, and the way that I understand prophecy and the Bible is that, but there is something else that's going to be a fulfillment. That's just a shadow. That's like a basic example of it, but there is going to be rapture. There is going to be tribulation. There is going to be the end of the world. Go on. You're gonna say something?
No. That you've answered a number of questions that I had about that. That's why I just let you go on. You're answering questions of mine. Yeah. So definitely, rapture will occur, or something like rapture will occur.
I don't. If the rapture happens, which I believe it will happen, I don't believe in pre-trib. That's something that I used to believe in, watching. First, that it was introduced to me because I didn't know anything about it. I went to Bible college and everybody believed that. So I was like, okay, cool. And then I watched the movie Left Behind. I was like, oh, that's what it's going to look like. And then as I started reading, I was like, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think we're going to be just saved from all this stuff that's happening.
You can't square pre-trib at all with Revelation. I don't think you can actually square rapture with Revelation, but you certainly cannot square pre-tribulation, because otherwise what are all the martyrs getting white cloaks doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so many things. And then again, I think that's more of I don't know if it's just American, but it's our way of seeing the world, like, oh, God wouldn't allow this to happen to us. Right. And like God wouldn't allow all this bad stuff to happen to us. He loves us too much to let bad things happen, which is interesting because I hear that a lot from Muslims, right? Because and so there's debate on that too, because some say that Jesus never was crucified because God
Yeah.
protected his prophet, and so it's weird because even Muhammad died from being poisoned by a Jewish woman, but we have other accounts of the it's crazy, right? Like
Well, yeah,
so there's a
there's so
whole thing,
many
and
legendary accounts as far as that goes, but yeah.
well, yeah, and so it definitely might, but it's weird because Muhammad in the Quran says, if I'm telling lies, let my aorta be cut. And on his deathbed when he's dying, because he gets poisoned and he's sick for a while, and he says, I feel my aorta being cut. And it's like, hey, you just said if I'm a false prophet, let me die by my aorta being cut. Then you just confirmed it on your deathbed. So it's weird because these are actual Muslim sources. These aren't like
Well,
Christians making this stuff up.
these are hadith. So
Hadith, yeah.
Yeah, there's enough. I mean, and that's you can data mine the Hadith the same way you can data mine the New Testament or the Old Testament for that matter.
Yeah.
Find things that you think are indicative of other things because they're the products of many hands. I don't believe that the Quran was written in dictation from the angel Jibril. I don't believe. I don't believe the prophecies in the Hebrew Bible are the work of one hand. I mean, I think it's one person gets a view from God and writes it down, and then it's never touched again because there's no way that's actually true. It gets touched up a lot of times. It gets changed. It gets used. Prophecy is a living or lived experience. You have this prophecy, you interpret it. No matter what the initial context is, you're going to continue to interpret it, and sometimes you'll add to it. Right? Yeah. There are people who will actually write not just commentaries, but even write in the name of the prophet themselves in the attempt to basically translate their concerns for their own time back into older texts because it gives them legitimacy.
That's true.
It gives their concerns weight. So, yeah, I mean, we're not, Jews weren't immune to it, Christians weren't immune to it, Muslims aren't immune to it. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. It's so fascinating to me.
That's definitely true. I forgot what we were talking about before I started talking about
how you interpret when the end of time, the end days, and what might happen and when, and how you.
But I was trying to think why I even tied it in there. Just the idea of Jesus. I was talking about America. The idea of America thinking that God loves us so much, He's not going to let any bad happen to us. And then I kind of tied it into why Muslims said Jesus was never crucified, right? Because God loved them so much, He was going to protect them. That was the idea. And then I went on. It just kept going. But that idea, because I see that a lot, right? Like we see it from preachers, and we hear it from like Joe Osteen type of sometimes your best life now type of idea, like right now is going to be your best life. I know what the idea is. The idea is like, in this little time that we have, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever we have, make it the best, right? Like we want to do the best. We want to give, we want to love, we want to do all the good stuff. But the idea that God's going to protect us from every bad thing, I don't think that that's anywhere in scripture, I guess, in a sense. I mean,
I don't think the United States is in scripture. So
and so that idea, so that's why as I started reading and lived the experience, to be honest, I was like, I don't think that's what's going to happen for the pre-trib, right? Whether or not we get raptured, I mean, I don't know. At this point, I'm like, I may be dead, because I was like, it's going to happen in my time. I'm going to be alive. Now I'm like, you know what? I may be dead. I don't know. I pray for pre-trib, but more realistic, if there's a rapture, it's going to be mid-trib, post-trib. He's not going to just keep us from harm. Right, he's gonna be with us. He's gonna love us, but I don't think He's just gonna. All our problems are not gonna be there, because I still have a lot of problems that I go through right now. Right.
The author of Revelation would strongly suggest that if you're going to enter the tribulations, you're entering it. You're not going to be protected. Very strongly implies that. What the author of Revelation says is that your side wins.
Exactly.
That's that you are protected.
Yeah, and I think that's the point. Like, that's a spoiler alert. Like, we win. We are overcome by the blood of the Lamb and word of our testimony. They did not love their lives unto death.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're getting killed. They're getting beheaded. There's all these things happening. So but you're right. That the point, and I think that's the bigger point of the Bible that a lot of Christians miss, is that when it's speaking, it's not speaking directly to me only. Like it's we win, not I win. Because I think that's a big thing. This is not for you, but in general for Christians who are listening, like Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Or some people even go to the point to say, I don't have to go to church because I am the temple. I am the temple of God. Each time that Paul says you are the temple of God, you are the body of Christ, that it's plural. Y'all, you all of y'all together are the temple. It's not a singular. And so those are other things that I think we miss, and we make it about us, and we misinterpret the Bible, and we mess up prophecies, we mess up scripture, we mess up all these things.
You'll carry the cross, right? At the very heart of Christianity is the notion that Jesus died. And if you want to live the example of Jesus, you need to be prepared for such a circumstance yourself. And this idea very heavily animated early Christianity because it was a practical idea. If you expect that the world is going to end, and you expect that your behavior will be noted, your experience will be noted before it goes, you expect that the world itself is against you, then you need to be prepared for that particular possibility. It also has a survival value, right? You're not just going to give up because you experience some adversity. And
sorry, I was gonna just say, I think that's gonna be a snippet or a clip or a headline. Non-Christian preaches the gospel better than other preachers, right? Like that was, what you just said is absolutely true. And we don't sometimes we don't get it, right?
For the other clip then can be that I'm telling you what your gospels definitely say. I'm not believing. I don't believe the message, but absolutely.
You don't believe it, but at least you understand it, right? You may not agree with it, you may not believe in it, but at least you understand it.
I understand it,
and that's important.
That's certainly my hope.
Important. Yeah. All right, so we only got a little bit of time. I know time is running, but is there let's jump into some of your questions. We kind of answered a little bit of it, but is there's any other parts so we can go a little bit deeper? I kind of gave like a nutshell of what I believe. And again, some of those things I don't hold to, like the rapture. If I'm not rapture, I'm not gonna be mad. I'm just like, I think there's gonna be a lot of bad stuff to happen at the end of time. If there's any other questions you want to kind of dive deeper into? We touched a little bit on some of it, but yeah.
Okay. So you are expecting a second coming. You're expecting you're expecting some form of rapture, but you believe that you're going to be Christians who are there to experience will experience the tribulation. Basically.
Yes.
To some extent.
And probably if I do more research, I'm probably, because even like other people that I know that studied it more, they're like, yeah, there's probably not a rapture. Right, like even in the verses.
I got a list of books that you may find useful. They're David Ayoun's work is kind of was the ones that was cited to me the most. The issue is it's dense. I mean, the guy's got footnotes in Greek, so but it's he's kind of considered the primary critical scholarship interpretation for Revelation, and he goes into tons of detail, and it's 3 massive books covering Revelation.
Wow. What's his name?
Yeah, I read through them, and they were very, very interesting. And it's good because he's not going for his perspective is he's just working on the text and telling you what he thinks the language might mean. And he addresses the arguments, which there's still tons of various arguments over what things mean in Revelation, because Revelation is,
I mean, if there's a post-trip rapture, it kind of makes no sense. What's the point of being raptured at that point?
Rapture does not factor into his interpretation of Revelations because it's not there. There's no rapture.
Yeah, it's not there. I think it's in Matthew, 1 Thessalonians. It's a few other places.
Timothy, it's Timothy 2 and 2 Timothy. He'll be reached up into the clouds. When Jesus
Yeah, I
comes
think.
back, he'll be transported up in the clouds as he's coming in,
Yeah,
and a couple others. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
That's for me. Rapture's always been just a weird aside because I would never really understand what to do with it as a Jew in the first place. I mean, if you're going to talk to Jews about your messianic expectations, but don't worry, God's going to protect you. And then you look at Jewish history, you go, really? Are
yeah.
we sure
And
about that?
that's another reason why I'm like, yeah, I don't think it doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. That's a okay if you say so. So it's definitely outside of the Jewish experience, but
Yeah.
you do what you do with what you can with what you have. So my further is what are your expectations? Do you Jesus's return in Revelations is very dramatic.
Hmm.
The end and goes into a lot of detail.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at other, and then you have the details that you would find in Matthew, you find in the Synoptic Gospels more than anything else, and you have indications on what Paul's expectations were in some of his letters, in particular First Corinthians. What are you expecting? Are you going to try? Are you reading the signs? I mean, what are the things that you'd look at to say, I think we're getting closer?
Yeah. So I mean, for the most part, a lot of stuff that's happening kind of does make me think of the signs. So one is, and we touched on this a little bit. So one is going to be the currency, the way the currency works. We can't buy, we can't sell, we can't do anything. So obviously the microchips was a big sign, like, oh, maybe this could be it, right? And it's funny because and I'll explain that more if you don't know exactly what I mean. But
I know what you mean, but
oh, okay. Yeah, so that was just one of the things because it's funny because I work at a bank and we have like 15 different passwords and all the passwords have to be different and all this. And I was like, now I understand why people want the chip because I'm like, look, just touch my hand and the password's in there. I hate having to put each password, and if I forget it, then I have to
yeah,
reset, and it can't be one of the last 32 passwords I have previously used. Long way to say. So I think as we get closer, like even right now, we don't in April, we're not gonna accept the penny. Penny's gonna be done. We don't. If you have a check and you're trying to cash it for a cent, you're not getting that penny, right? We
right.
have to round up, we have to round down, but the pennies are gonna be done away with. I
Mhm.
know, there's a push for digital currency. There's good and bad. It's convenient, but then and I don't even know. I don't really follow him, but I know Dave Ramsey was saying. But then if there's digital currency, the government has control. They can stop. They can you if there's only digital currency, they can stop your money. They can take your money. Your money can be wiped out without a trace, type of thing. And I don't know if he's going on some conspiracy theory type stuff either. I don't. Again, I don't really follow him. I just seen that
I got
recently. Um, so the one world currency that obviously the wars that are happening. Jesus said there's gonna be wars and rumors of war, but like you
Can I
said, that
stop you for
can.
a second on the
Yes,
one
yes, yes.
world
Say it again.
currency?
I think that's the idea. Maybe not, but
What
that's
would
what
that
I've heard.
currency be? I'm just
Say it,
I'm
say it
idly
again.
curious because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what would the one world currency be for you? How would you interpret that? I know it's interesting that you work in a bank,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah. So I don't. So it doesn't say, right? It doesn't say if it's gonna be one world currency. These are other
the author of
people's ideas.
Revelation doesn't even have the same concept of what the world would be to what you would have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, so what I mean, so what it says is that you can't buy, you can't sell unless you have the mark of the beast, right? Like that's what it's talking about.
Mhm.
How this goes into interpretation. These are people that I've heard say it in passing. Again, these are not me studying them or listening to them or even believing what they
Understood.
believe. But yeah, these are just people saying this, and I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Again, I haven't studied it deeper, so I'm not held to any of these things like, oh no, this has to be it. This is just what I've heard. And so their idea is things are going to happen. It's going to get real bad. The world's going to be at war with itself. The world is going to be at war with Israel. And then when everyone turns their back, then there's going to be someone to rise, an antichrist to rise. He's going to say, hey, let's make peace. So he's going to have world peace. Everyone's going to be at peace. And then he's going to institutionalize this
Okay.
currency. Again, these are theories. These are like movies,
It's
Left Behind type stuff.
or Hal
Um,
Lindsey's late great Planet Earth earlier in the
yeah,
1970s.
yeah. So there's a bunch of movies and ideas where that's
Mhm.
probably where they got it from, right? And
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I don't know.
There's
I was gonna say Animal Farm. I never read it or anything, but I don't know if that has to do with
not
this.
an Animal Farm, guarantee it.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because I know some people have brought that up and
Uh,
other stuff like that, Hunger Games type stuff,
there are
ideas.
few bits of literature that I know better than the works of George Orwell. So I can
Oh,
guarantee you that they probably haven't read Animal Farm either, or they did. It was 30 years ago, and they forgot what the story was about.
yeah, and again, I'm saying stuff that I don't know. I just know, and I don't know if maybe it's Animal Farm, and was it 19? What's the other book he has?
1984.
Yeah. So what are those about? Because that might be like about tribulation or
Animal
Hunger Games.
Farm. Animal Farm is largely about how revolutions consume both the revolutionary and the state. That ends up
Okay.
happening. It is a parody of the Bolshevik Revolution.
Okay.
That'll be the Soviet. Keep in mind, Orwell was a communist, right? But he was a very, but he referred to himself as a socialist because he disliked Stalinism so viscerally. But his reaction, he hated the Stalinistic state. 1984 is a parody of the Stalinistic state. And it's also a parody of what happened to the Russian Revolution, because a lot of his fellow socialists were still lauded the success of the Soviet Union in helping to defeat Hitler in World War II. So the context of Animal Farm is 1946, and he's got a lot of emotional baggage he wants to get out, and he wants to reach a broader audience by basically copying Tolkien. I'm going to tell you a story about barnyard animals taking over the farm. But it's going to be a very not veiled political satire, and it's brilliant. And it's one of the reasons we'll still be reading Orwell in a few centuries.
Yeah. What is
1984?
Yeah. What is that one
1984
about?
is a further parody on the totalitarian tendencies of modern politics. It was written in 1948. That's where he gets the date from. And it is a parody over his concerns of where the world is going as it devolves into control from three competing totalitarian superstates: Oceania, where we are in, East Asia, roughly China, and the rest, and China, and Eurasia, Russia, and then the zone of places where we fight. Right, three superstates are all fighting on the margins, trying to ultimately defeat each other. If you've not read 1984, and you are not, the stuff gave me nightmares when I was a kid when I read it. It is one of the most. It is. I've known a number of dissidents, especially from the old Soviet Union, and every last one of them came back and said, yes, he was describing Soviet Russia, where I just came from. I read a copy of a translation of 1984 in Russian on samizdat, which means fax machines. They'd use fax machines to print books.
Yeah.
You couldn't just go down. You couldn't go buy them, could you? Right. They're illegal to possess. So you'd translate them into Russian and you'd read them. And you'd go, he's talking to me. This English socialist in 1948 is reaching through time, and he's almost like prophecy. He's talking to me about my experience, where I live. This is why Orwell is powerful. And he used to be taught pretty widely. I think he should be taught. He's brilliant. But you have to understand the context he's writing in, and he's about as far from Christian as you can possibly be. He's not religious in any way. Yeah. He's not concerned about a religious end of the world. He's talking instead about
that's why I don't know. I'm trying to listen as you're talking to what the connections are, and I don't know what the connections are. Maybe it's about just superpowers, something like that.
Yeah, could be. Sure.
Yeah. I don't know, because it's been so many years, and I didn't have a conversation when they were giving like a talk, and they were just, Revelation is big, and there's different parts, and there's so many different years and stuff like that, and then it's also not in chronological order. Again, which is so many reasons why I stayed away from it. So So back to kind of what the idea is, that there's going to be all this stuff happens. Someone's going to rise up. He's going to unite people. And then he's like, hey, I don't know if you've seen the movie Demolition Man. I think they're going to make
Yeah.
a part 2. Yeah. So something kind of like that. At least that's what I vision of what they've said. Not what scripture said, but what they said. Is what they said it's going to be like, what's the word? Where everything's peace, utopia type of thing, where everyone just kind of follows the laws and everyone's happy, kumbaya type of thing. That's what I vision based off what they've said. Again, this may, and most likely it's probably going to be a bunch of like, more like probably like Hunger Games, like we destroy ourselves, so everything's kind of rubble anyway. It's not like all futuristic, nice and upkept. It's probably gonna like, hey, we just bombed each other and now we have to live with it. Now let's stop fighting because we messed up. And so yeah, something along the lines there. I don't know which one comes first, and that's part of the problem, because even in Revelation, the thing that gets me, I think I mentioned this last time, is that I hate that God comes, he makes everything good, and then he lets the devil out for another 1,000 years. I'm like, just murder the dude. Get rid of him. Don't let him.
Prophecies in Ezekiel.
Yeah. And so that, so I do have my own frustrations and questions, like, just murder, get rid of the guy already, right? Like he did so much stuff. You locked him up, just wipe him out. Don't wait till the hellfire or the lake of fire and hell is thrown in. Just do it. Don't let him back out, is my idea. And again, it's not in chronological order. So I don't know what happens first, and I don't know why it would make sense that the world would get real bad, then it comes good, and then so yeah, I don't know.
Does the intentions of the author of Revelation matter in your analysis?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. And so his original intent, his first intent is, hey, don't give up the faith because we win, right? The people, the Christians suffering under Nero, the Christians suffering under persecution, the Christians that are suffering, hey, bad stuff is going to happen and we're going to win, right? We're going to, like you said, that's the main point to the original audience.
Yes.
There is a point to us as well that we can apply, but they were the original audience, and the original audience, I feel like that was the original intent. Spoiler alert. Yes.
It's the first century.
Yeah.
If you were to ask the author of Revelations who the beast was, who the state that was going to be doing these awful things was, do you have a moment's doubt over what state he was referring to?
I'm pretty sure we all agree it was Rome.
Yeah, it was Rome.
Yeah.
Right. He went out of his way to say it's Rome, but it's not Rome. It's Rome, right?
It's Rome, but don't kill me. So let me.
Beast with 7 heads, right? It's like, the 7 hills of Rome. Yeah, we get it. On to the next thing. Yeah, the author of Revelation is unambiguous. He's describing his world and his part of the world, which is the Roman Empire. So when he's talking about the persecution about not being able to buy and sell, we still don't know what that means, right? There's no even a critical scholarship consensus over what the terms mean according to Revelations. It's been mentioned before that it was a particular Roman coin, the sesterces, because it would have one of the Roman imperial side reliefs on the other side.
Yeah,
but it's also obviously a parody of Deuteronomy 8, which is telling you you'll make a sign, you'll wear them as a signpost for your house, you'll bind them to your forehead. It's a parody of the phylacteries and the mezuzah among the Jews too. So it's doing a lot of things, and the problem is the author of Revelations doesn't really specify. It's serving a lot of functions to basically say, look, the state's coming after you,
and it's they're gonna kill you.
At multiple means, and it's coming to kill you, and you need to be prepared. You need to understand the nature of the world and what you're fighting against. Now, I would ask you to consider what that would mean translating this concern from the author of Revelation all the way over to the experience, say, of Christians living in the 21st century, and see all the ways in which the world has changed or done other things or moved on, and see how these things would fit together. And I'm not telling you what to think about that. I'm just saying that's something that's worth thinking about, of reflecting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because as you know, I always say context is king. The context is absolutely important, right? The original audience is the first context, right? It's not us today. It's not just the literary context, but it's them. The original audience is absolutely important.
There was a great TikTok video I saw. It's not all bad with TikTok, just so you know. That had these joke comparisons about, it's like Jesus in the video comes back and he's talking to his own audience, who are obviously supposed to be first century Jews, saying, this prophecy isn't about you. It's about Bob in Missouri in about 2,000 years. I'm sorry. I mean, it's not really about you.
That was
like, oh my God. Yeah. That really kind of got right to the heart of the matter over who the prophecy is supposed to speak to. Now, it's true. Prophecy speaks to whomever is spoken to, right? If you read prophecy and you see yourself in the prophetic description, then obviously as literature, it is speaking to you. What you choose to do with that, of course, is going to be up to you. But I think it's important to realize what the context was when it was written down and what the people who were doing the writing thought about it. But I mean, if you are expecting, I mean, if Jesus is to return and you're trying to go through all the various signs to see what you think you find convincing about it, then, you know, you're going to do it.
I was just curious because that just brought another thought to me, because when John is writing this, you know, he's like, hey, Rome's going to be this, you know, they're going to come kill you, right? These emperors are going to kill you. They're going to blame stuff on you. They're going to throw you to lions and stuff like that. Yeah. And then a few hundred years later, Rome
is Christian.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's just, So that's just interesting. Or what'd you say?
Yeah. I said more or less. Rome becomes Christian.
More or less. At least it's legal. Christianity becomes legal.
Well,
so they don't have to run for their lives.
We could have a punishingly long conversation over what that even means historically. But yeah, for the purposes of Christian reader, that's one of the reasons why St. Augustine wasn't thrilled about the notion of including Revelation into the canon. Educated Christians in the 3rd and 4th century went, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do with this book. It's weird, especially in the 4th century when Christianity becomes legit, following the worst persecutions in Roman history under the pagan emperor Diocletian. And then the Constantine basically makes the religion legit and then converts over on his deathbed. And within a and it goes from just being a legit state-sponsored religion to the only religion the state will recognize in about 6 years. Because it's a wonderful way of... the ancient world didn't have banks. They had temples. That's where the money was stored. So if you really need money, you know, turning a temple into a church turns out to be a tremendously wise business decision and makes an awful lot of very, very rich Christian bishops. Yeah, I've studied a lot of, especially Roman history and the history of the ancient Mediterranean. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, that's another thing that gets Christians too, was like, you know, if you look at the Bible, most likely America is closer to Rome than it is to Judea or Israel. Like, we're the superpower in a sense, you know, we're the strong
in every
one.
sense. Yeah, of course we are. So then where does that context work, right?
Exactly.
So what I'm saying is that if, like, for example, you're waiting for a world currency, well, okay. I'm not sure how that would come about. And then we're looking for a world government. And, you know, if you go back in the 1970s, someone like Cal Lindsay is going to tell you some combination of the UN or maybe the European Union, which was just being in the process of the European Common Market was in the process of being born in the 1970s. So He's looking at these globalist institutions and going, yeah, I think that's going to be where the Antichrist comes from. So I like to sort of torment people who expect the Antichrist by saying, so you really think the UN Security Council is going to be empowering the Antichrist? Have you seen the United Nations Security Council? I mean, I don't know how these institutions would produce these sorts of things in a time of trouble. And that's the other problem. There's always times of trouble. Times of trouble are generic in somewhere, someplace. They're having a time of trouble.
No, you're absolutely right. I do feel like COVID was a different time of trouble, right? Like that feels like that was a global event. But you're right? Because I mean, I'm younger than you, but we lived through a lot of crazy stuff in this period of time. We lived through COVID. We lived through, I don't think it's gonna be World War III, but you know what I mean? Like there's all these other things. Because before I was like, we heard that over and over, right? When I was in high school, 9/11 happened. That was traumatic. That's a bad thing. But then now it seems like, this is a global size thing. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking as you're talking. You know what I mean?
My dad was born in 1914. He's not alive anymore, but because he'd be about as old as he'd be like Moses' age. But he lost 2 siblings to Spanish influenza when he was 4 years old. So the two of the kids who were older than him were carried off by Spanish influenza, which killed somewhere between 70 and 80 million people in the world. We don't really know because they weren't tracking it very thoroughly in places like Asia, where it no doubt killed probably, there's some estimates I've seen as high as 150 million people.
Wow.
So 1918 to 1919, we had a COVID-style event. It killed far more people than COVID did. But it wasn't anywhere near as large a news event because we didn't have the ability to track it the way we had with COVID. With COVID, we could literally create international databases that could see the damage that was being done and even then argue over what the actual number was.
True.
Spanish influenza wasn't even a rounding error compared to the number of people who were killed by the bubonic plague in the 14th century, which may have killed as many as a third of all the people on the planet.
Wow. That's crazy.
Maybe not. Probably only a quarter. Split the difference.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of people. Now, it took a long time to do it. It took like 100 years to get to that total. But I'm just bringing it up for a sense of perspective. In my dad's generation, he saw air travel become routine. He saw World War II. He didn't really see World War I. He was too young to remember anything. He watched family members die during Spanish influenza. He survived the Great Depression. He saw all these things that happened in his lifetime. You can imagine sometime around 1942, what will your thoughts be on where the state of the world's going to be?
Yeah.
Right? The whole world, well, not the whole world, but a huge portion of the most productive portions of the world are at war in 1942. Not like Iran. Iran looks like it's going to be a fairly big deal, but Iran isn't a big deal. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not a world war level deal. Defeating whatever happens in Iran, it's not going to be as dramatic as what happened in World War II.
That's for sure.
Every age goes through its crises, and we are living in a globalized age because you can.
That's a good point.
And you know about things, right? Let's say you're the author of Revelation. You're going, okay, this is the end of the world. The Roman state is possibly collapsing. There's wars happening all over the place. The temple is destroyed. What am I going to make sense of this? We're going to be persecuted or not persecuted. So what's going on in China? You imagine what? What? Okay, never mind China. What's going on in Peru? A what? I mean, yeah. There's not a world to refer back to, or the world that they refer back to is the world that's as large as the one that they know. And they know that there's Rome and then there's barbarians outside of Rome.
Yeah.
And then maybe it goes a little bit further than that. Who knows? But they don't have a world, and even the world that they do have, the connection speed is as basically fast as somebody can walk, or sail a ship, or ride a horse. Right?
Yeah.
So I would just be cautious, if that makes sense, about
absolutely.
our interpretations, because we're. Can you imagine what a 24-hour news cycle would be like in ancient Rome? Tap the screen and CNN. I just imagine CNN being delivered in Latin and Greek. I mean, it's like, or it's a very, very different world. I think even if the world, I'll just speculate, but I think even if the world were run by saints and nothing bad was happening, it would feel like stuff was falling apart all the time, because we are seeing a much more detailed picture of what happens at any given moment in the world at any given time. There's nothing to compare it to in ancient history.
That's true.
You can be isolated, informationally speaking. Hell, even in my dad's generation, they didn't have the scope of knowledge that we have about what's happening every single moment. And that's just because of the revolution.
Just years ago, right?
Yeah.
5-10 years ago, they didn't have what they have now. So yeah.
Right. So imagine it 50 years ago or even 100 years ago. And 100 years ago would be much closer to us than the way the Romans would have experienced it. I mean, hell, they didn't even have regular mail.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'm saying is that it is a point of view. It's a common conceit, but it's a point of view from a different world. And we have a natural tendency to catastrophize and to be thinking that all this very, very important stuff is about us.
Yeah.
Where there's so many people it could be about.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And so it's good because that's usually what I tell other people. So it's good to see whenever it happens in my own, right? Because that's what I tell people. Like, these are not written about us. So when it happens in the US, we're not thinking about global. Like, it wasn't written to us, like you said, to Bob in Oklahoma or whatever. Right. But we do that. I do that as well.
Natural tendency.
Which is it's definitely a great caution for us to kind of keep an eye on and say, hey, this is not let's not forget the actual audience. Let's not forget what it was actually communicating. You're missing scene. Do you need a
okay, I'm looking at the time and I do need to break in pretty soon, like 5 minutes at most. So got a final question, and I'll try really, really hard to be brief.
That's what I was gonna ask you. Just any final thoughts as we think about this. So I like the way that we did which is especially for us in Christian. This is not just for apocalyptic literature. This is not just for Revelation. This is in general. As you're reading, these are good cautions to kind of think and take a step out. These are just good practices for reading literature, but also especially for reading the Bible, not to overemphasize, because a lot of times I'll find Christians that they'll read about the Pharisees like, oh, they're so terrible. Or there's a story where the Pharisee is looking at this tax collector, and the tax collector is like, God, I'm messed up. I'm terrible. And the Pharisees, thank you, God, because I'm not like that tax collector. And then we look at that and like, thank you, God, I'm not like that Pharisee. And we become that Pharisee.
Sure.
And so it's easy to do. Obviously, this is for like Christians as you're reading, not to become those Pharisees. And we do it as well as we're reading, as we're dissecting some of my ideas about Revelation, or even just some ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's probably not what that means. Or that makes sense that's probably overly cautious of my own personal view or my own American understanding, and most likely it's probably not that. But any final thoughts on your end?
I would definitely further caution of reading contemporary events into ancient biblical realities. And I would also note that people in power who have a desire to control you, maybe in ways that you don't want to be controlled, are happy to use these texts for their own advantage. And I'd end on that. I mean, whatever you're going to do it with both eyes open and understand the particular process. Christianity starts out as a movement that is not invested in power.
Hmm.
Your origins are as a rebellion, not invested in power. Not a non-violent rebellion, but still a rebellion, not invested in power. And it is a reaction to the power that you're experiencing, and a desire for a better world.
Hmm.
Once this system is then becomes the power, the dynamic will totally and irrevocably, well, maybe not irrevocably, but will completely change. And now you have to be worried about other things. So you go from a situation under Diocletian in 300 where Christians are definitely being oppressed to a situation in which pagans and Jews were definitely being oppressed by 380 under Theodosius II. This starts a pattern. The pattern is still with us. People who would use the power of whatever enthusiasm they can get from believers for their own ends. And just know that it's an old story, and it's one that's being replayed right now in a way that, in the case of the United States, is surprising to me. I grew up in a U.S. that had plenty of difficulties, plenty of problems, but I didn't actually think that my Christian neighbors were going to be one of them.
Hmm. Yeah, no, those are great, great takeaways. This is gonna be another clip. Non-Christian preaches the gospel and helps with some hermeneutics. Yeah, no, but
Love it.
100%. Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
appreciate you. We'll definitely connect again soon.
Right on.
And everyone put some questions, comments, chat, put them down there. Until next time, peace.
Shalom.
Shalom, shalom.